Convertible securities. Securities that can be converted into shares of stock as the option of the holder of the security, that is, convertible securities. We actually learned this in the investment chapter. So convertible securities are potentially dilutive. So if they are converted, they are dilutive. If they are not converted, they are not dilutive. So we say they are potentially diluted. However, the potentially dilutive effect of the convertible securities is reflected in diluted EPS calculations by pretending they were converted into common stock occurred at the beginning of the period. In other words, no matter you convert it or not, we assume it is already converted into common stock. So when we pretend they are converted, the denominator of the earnings per share fraction is increased by the additional common shares that would have been issued upon conversion. The numerator is increased by the interest after tax or net tax on bonds or other debt, or the preferred dividends that would have been avoided if the convertible securities had not been outstanding due to having been converted. Let's see the example of convertible bonds. So if this company has convertible bonds at 8%, $300 million face amount issued in 23, convertible into 12 million common shares. Therefore, let's see the diluted earnings per share. The numerator first, we need to calculate after-tax interest expense savings. What happened is the interest we will save 8% times 300 million, right? And the net tax effect is 25% of that is tax. Therefore, we only save the net amount is 24 less 24 times 25%. Let me calculate. So the net tax effect is save 18 interest expense, and the denominator increased by 12 million. So the diluted earnings per share is 1.87, which is less than the basic earnings per share. So we use the diluted earnings per share. Convertible preferred stock. Earnings per share is calculated as if conversion already had occurred. Effect on earnings per share calculation. Shares are added to the denominator of the earnings per share fraction. The preferred dividends in the denominator are not subtracted because those dividends would have been avoided if the preferred stock had been converted. So we need to add back the dividends. Right. Because dividends are not tax deductible, so we don't need to worry about tax rate in the convertible preferred stock calculation. We assume this company has preferred stock convertible into 3 million common shares. So what we do is add back or eliminate the preferred dividends paid. But for the denominator, we increase 3 million outstanding common shares. So the diluted earnings per share for the convertible preferred stock is 1.85, which is less than the basic earnings per share. Anti-dilutive securities. If the effect of the conversion or exercise of potential common shares would be to increase rather than decrease, ignored when calculating both basic and diluted earnings per share. For example, options, warrants, rights. When the buyback price is higher than the exercise price, the number of shares assumed repurchased is fewer than the number of shares assumed sold. Shares are sold at the exercise price and repurchased at the market price. Buying back more shares than were sold produces a net decrease in the number of shares, so EPS would increase, not decrease. If there were warrants granted in 23, exercisable for 4 million common shares at an exercise price of $32.50 per share, the calculations of both basic and diluted EPS are unaffected by the warrants because the effect of exercising the warrants would be anti-dilutive. For convertible securities, it is difficult to determine whether the effect of conversion of convertible securities will be dilutive or anti-dilutive because the assumed conversion affects both the numerator and the denominator of the earnings per share fraction. Alternative way to determine whether convertible securities are dilutive and should be included in a diluted earnings per share calculation. So if the incremental effect of conversion is greater than the basic earnings per share, it's anti-dilutive. If the incremental effect of conversion is less than the basic earnings per share, it is dilutive.